a lot of husbands and wives would probably court each other more, if they knew how.
What attracted me to Ron was he was a very caring person, loving, kind, considerate. He put me first, and that was very important.
The little things that James does, like give me a card, every now and then, and just tells me how much he loves me.
But we don't feel like it's fair to one another to make a major move without involving the other.
Because we're a team now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Partners.
9 days ago. Yeah.
That's right. For life.
Pretty soon, 9 days.
Yeah.
Now that we've been married into our 53rd year, it is the best decision we made.
What would it be without disagreements? It would be, it's like the conflicts, you learn to understand his idiosyncrasies, and he understands mine. He really does.
Sex in marriage is such a God-given gift because God invented sex. He invented us. He created us. And
With that desire.
Yes.
Are we going to tell him that?
Maybe.
Welcome to Courtship After Marriage. This presentation is based on Zig Ziglar's book, Courtship After Marriage, Romance Can Last a Lifetime. And it's designed as an optimistic and practical guide for married couples. Zig will help you recapture the feelings you had when you were courting and rekindle the spark of romance. And now, sharing ideas on how to have a happy and successful marriage, here is motivational teacher Zig Ziglar.
Thank you. Thank you. So many beautiful people here this evening. I was on a plane once with an old boy, and I couldn't help but notice that he had his wedding band on the index finger of his left hand. Now, that's a little unusual. So I just commented on it. I said, "Friend, you got your wedding band on the wrong finger." And he said, "Yeah, married the wrong woman." Now, I don't know if he married the wrong woman or not, but I sure am delighted to be able to say I did not marry the wrong woman. Last November, the redhead and I, now, the redhead, that's my wife. She's a decided redhead, meaning simply that one day she just decided she is going to be a redhead. And instead of, when I talk about her, I always just call her the redhead. When I'm talking to her, it's Sugar Baby, and her name is Jean. Well, last November, we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. That's right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So it's pretty obvious I did not marry the wrong woman. Now, we've been married 43 years. Now, but we had heard so much about the 50th that we just decided to go ahead and celebrate early. And folks, I'm here to tell you that is some more celebration.
I believe, obviously, that someday we will celebrate the 50th or the 60th or who knows, maybe the 70th or 80th wedding anniversary. Of course, how long we're here is up to God, but if we're both here, we'll be together because, we really do practice the things that we're talking about here. I think it's important that every couple do that. You can be in love all of your life. As a matter of fact, that love should by all odds grow. I know ours has.
Several years ago, I received a phone call from a man in Atlanta. And as he shared with me what his problem was, and it was a substantial one, his wife had just asked him for a divorce. And he said, Zig, I don't want a divorce. He said, we've been married 21 years. I love my wife very much. As a matter of fact, far more now than I did when we married. We now have our first grandchild, and he's the apple of my eye. He said, do you have any ideas? Is there anything that you might suggest? And I said, well, I've recently made a recording, and I will send you this recording, which basically will be some of the material I'll be covering this evening. And maybe there'll be some ideas that the two of you can share and benefit from. Well, about 2 weeks later, I got another telephone call from Atlanta, and this time the man and his wife both were on the telephone, and they were bubbling like a couple of teenagers. I'm telling you, they were flat turned on. As a matter of fact, as they were talking and bubbling, they said, you know, Zig, we've gotten it back together. We really appreciated that tape, and man, we're just having a ball. And then it kind of got quiet there for a moment. And the lady came on by herself, and she said, Zig, let me tell you why that recording was so meaningful. She said, you didn't know it, but a couple of years ago, you and your redhead, after church one Sunday evening, were over at the Fairmont Hotel having a bowl of their famous French onion soup. As you walked in, I don't think you knew anybody else was there. They took you to a table where there were 4 seats, 2 on either side, but you did not sit across from your bride. You sat right next to her. And for the next hour and a half, your conduct, Zig, was really interesting to watch. You had eyes only for her, and she had eyes only for you. The two of you talked and chatted and chattered and just exchanged a lot of the pleasantries, and we watched all of that, and we watched as you left, as you helped her out of the chair and walked out the front door. She said, you know, Zig, I know you never saw us, but she said, we saw you. And when we saw that after all of the years you two have been married, if you can be that much in love and that attentive to each other, we knew that in just 21 years, we certainly were just getting started in marriage. And I just want to say thank you for the example. I also want to say something to those of you who've had some difficulties. We know that marriage is a challenge. It's something that goes on all the time. If you have had difficulties in yours, or if you have been divorced, let me plead with you, I am not trying to send you on a guilt trip. As a matter of fact, that's the last thing on earth that I ever would want to happen to you. As a matter of fact, I can assure you that in all probability you did what you did when you did it based on the information that you had at that time. It was a mistake. I can assure you that I believe you do not need to look back on. So don't look back in despair. Do look forward with hope. The pages of your past have already been turned, and they cannot be rewritten. But the pages of your tomorrow are blank. I would remind you, as I often do, regardless of the subject I'm addressing, that failure is an event. Everything that we will be covering is designed to take you from the situation you're in right now with the marriage you're in at the moment and help you make that the kind of marriage that will be tremendously exciting and enormously rewarding. You see, marriage is tremendously important to each one of us personally who is married. I believe, for example, that the seeds of success are very definitely in your marriage right now. As a matter of fact, I would simply say this to you: marriage never fails. People fail. They fail when they expect more than they give, talk more than they work, dream more than they do. You see, marriage isn't held together by one person. Two made it, two maintain it. Marriage doesn't solve problems, people do. Marriage doesn't do anything for people, they do something for marriage. Marriage is not an extended honeymoon. Marriage is a test, a happy struggle. Marriage is an opportunity to give yourself away. Marriage is like an empty box. Neither partner can take out what he hasn't put in. Dr. Alan Peterson said that, and I agree with what he said.
We've counseled a lot of people about divorce, who are considering divorce over the years, because having walked in those shoes, we knew how to speak to those people. First thing we say is that if there's any way, don't do it. Don't do it.
There's fresh grace and a new life.
And that's important for people to know, that there is hope. There is hope out there. Karen and I know that although the horror of divorce we've experienced, we also understand that we would never have known each other, and the larger thing is that neither one of us would have dealt with our faith in Christ probably if this had not happened to us. Now, we can't be sure of that. The freeing in our marriage came when we had totally forgiven the other parties. It's extremely important nowadays for folks that are remarried to see themselves as full heirs to a good marriage. They have the right to expect a good marriage and should have the hope and the joy that can come from a good restart.
And how you love someone going through a situation like this is very important. They need your love and support and encouragement to go on, because sometimes it can be very, very, you feel like a failure. And for someone to encourage you, why, that is really important.
What is the problem in the families today? Well, I think part of the problem goes back to the story of the Roman Catholic girl who was dating the Southern Baptist boy. After about the fourth date, she came in one night. She was all motivated and excited, enthused, and turned on, and her mother could see she was in trouble. So she said, now, daughter, said, we're going to have to put an end to this romance. Said, you know, those Catholics don't, us Catholics and Baptists just don't get married. Catholics don't marry Baptists, and those Baptists don't marry us. It's just a losing proposition. I want you to terminate the relationship. The girl said, well, Mom, it's too late. She said, I have fallen in love with that boy. Can't we do something? And being the good mother she was, she said, yeah, I'll tell you what we can do. We will sell that boy on taking instruction. We'll make a good Catholic out of him, and then everything will be all set. Well, she went to work. And I mean, the two of them put on a sales talk, and it was an easy sale. I mean, the boy was already sold on the product. I mean, that was not the, not the problem at all. So the wedding day was set. The announcements were sent out. The gifts started coming in, the church was reserved. Everything was all going. About a week before the wedding, the girl came in and just shedding those big old crocodile tears. She said, Mom, said, it's all over. Said, cancel the wedding, send back the gifts, call the priest, tell him to cancel it. It's all over. And the mother was in shock, and she said, well, daughter, I don't understand. I thought we had that boy sold on being a good Catholic. And the girl said, Mom, said, that's the problem. Said, we have oversold. Said, he's going to be a priest. Now, I got to tell you, folks, there's a lot of overselling done before the wedding, and that's the reason some of those weddings take place. My good friend, psychologist Charles Lowry, says this: when people are seriously courting, they are the ultimate deceivers. Now, there's no question about that. When you're courting and you're trying to talk them into that big, long walk down the aisle, not only do we put our best foot forward and shine it up, but we keep that sucker out there during the entire courtship process. Let's listen in on some of the conversations you might hear. Oh, no, honey. No problem. Oh, I love to shop. Oh, I just love it. I'm flattered. I'm flattered that you would want me to go with you and make my comments on the dresses and the clothes. Oh, you betcha. I love it. Cold weather? Why, that's no problem. I certainly don't mind getting up at 4 o'clock and riding 3 hours to get into the woods so we can be there when the deer awaken and stand there in that blind. No problem whatever. Football games? Oh, I love them. Absolutely love them. Little snow in the stadium? Oh, forget it. We've got warm clothes. It'll take care of all of those things. Oh, don't worry about your mom's ideas. I know that she shares a lot of them with us, but she's certainly a magnificent parrot. Look what she did with you. And as far as your dad's conversation, no problem. As you've noticed, I can eat while he's talking anyhow. But an interesting thing happens after the wedding. The qualities that we, quote, admired before the marriage, that strong, silent individual, now changes to he is uncommunicative. That personable and friendly girl now changes to superficial and flirtatious. But folks, let me tell you something. Changing mates is not the answer. If we've married the wrong person, or at least we married someone we did not realize we were marrying, let me share this with you. In our today's world, 50% of all marriages are ending in divorce. Second marriages, 60% of them end in divorce. 70% of third marriages end in divorce. Experience in choosing mates, in other words, is not the critical factor. What I am really saying, ladies and gentlemen, is we've got to deal with us.
Oh, our first date. You know, before Joe and I met in 1972, our parents camped in the same place the last 2 weeks of July every year. So I grew up with Joe from these skinny little legs and these big tennis shoes to this gorgeous tennis legs here, yeah. And so we didn't see each other for 5 years because I was in pharmacy school and I had an internship in Dallas. So he had called me. No, Dad had called me and told me that Joe was in Dallas and gave me his phone number. So I avoided him for 7 days while I starved myself. Pharmacy school was not good to me. It put on 20 pounds. It was great financially, but as far as physically, no. 20 pounds, and my hair was about this short, you know, so I spent the week pulling on my hair and starving myself. And finally we re-met, and
Yeah, after about 6 days.
yeah, answering machines, you know, they were
back and
great.
forth answering
Sorry, honey,
machine
you know,
recording.
I hear him on the line, it's like, oh gosh, not yet.
But we finally got together, and for our first date after not seeing each other for several years, and before then we were just great friends, you know.
Super.
But we saw each other, and I knew something was up because it was just different. And here I am trying to be Mr. Smooth with my little sports car, all happy about it, and thinking this thing is just not worth a darn. You know, it was awful.
And I'm embarrassed because I don't want him to be embarrassed. I'm trying to balance on the seat, you know, with it
Yeah.
all the way back because it wouldn't come up.
No.
It was broke.
No.
And so then we go for the tape thing, and it comes off. I'm like, oh no, this is going to be it.
Oh, it was incredible. It's like everything she touched in the car was either falling off or the glove compartment would pop open. She'd
I
close
mean, it
it
was
up. We'd hit a
terrible.
bump. It'd pop open again. It was sad. I mean, soon after that, I sold the car. Believe me. But we made it through. I mean, we finally got to where
Had a
we wanted
great
to go.
time.
Had a great time. And I figured, boy, if we can make it through that kind of first date, there's something really special here, you know. And I think that was a good start for us because it's like, hey, let's not impress each other. Let's just express.
You know, and I just love that about him because he was so kind and warm person, and that's really what attracted me first to him, is because he said, well, I got to get up and go because I got to go to church in the morning. And I said, well, is that a line or is that the truth? But then after I got to know him, I knew that he was a Christian man, and I liked that about him.
What attracted me to Lynetta, we were at a social function when we met. It was a mutual friend's birthday party. And when I first got a chance to see her, I walked over by her, and I was immediately attracted to her. She's a very beautiful person, and I was saying inside to myself, I didn't let her know that, but this is the woman that I'm going to marry right here. So I asked her, after we went through a conversation, I said, do you have a card? Because the company that I was a part of, we had just gotten a whole new advertising program for our advertising agency, and we had these slick, nice business cards, and I had this nice card with James Parker, Vice President, on here. So it was a way for me to kind of impress her by giving her this big-time, nice-looking card. And after a few moments of conversation, it's getting around 11:30 or 12, I put the Sunday school line on her. I said, well, I got to leave now, but do you have a card? And She just started laughing.
During our engagement, we learned a lot. We planned most of it ourselves because Laura's from Houston area and I'm from South Texas. And so it was all entirely up to us. And that was good for us, though.
It was real good.
Real good. Because we got to see each other at crunch time. And we did good. I mean, it was fun.
He was involved in every part of it, from the flowers to the photographer to the church, how we were setting it up, calling people. It was great having a partner.
First of all, we were saving money to buy our first home. It was really exciting because we had only been married a short time, and we were living in an apartment. And shortly after we got married, my wife became pregnant with my first child, Jamie. And we wanted to have a home by the time the baby was born. So it really got us focused, and it was really exciting to save the down payment. And that day we went to the mortgage company and we put down several $1,000s to pay down on our house. And it really was a bonding that we experienced right there, because we felt that if we could do this, we could do practically anything in relationship to our marriage.
Let me give you a specific corporate example of what it means to have husbands and wives together. In the May 1989 issue of Psychology Today, they reported on a study of 1,139 chief executive officers of the Fortune 2000 companies. There were some out of the Fortune 2000, and of these men, their average income was $356,000. But please hear this. Their number one priority was their family. They were peak performers. They were not workaholics. Integrity rated extraordinarily high on their ladder of importance. 90% of them exercised regularly. Less than 10% of them smoked. And all of that to say, a balanced life undergirded by the family itself. So important. Another study. This one done by Korn Ferry International, a New York executive search firm involving 1,361 vice presidents. They did it in conjunction with the UCLA School of Management. They found that 87% of these men were still married to their one and only wife, and 92% of them were raised by two-parent families. Now, what am I saying? I'm saying that teams do better than individuals. That's not to say that individuals cannot make it. I'm just saying that the team gives you a magnificent advantage when you've got that support there, really giving you that encouragement. For example, the giant Belgian horse is a powerful animal. By himself, one of them can pull over 8,000 pounds. You put two of them together, they can pull 18,000 pounds. But when you put them in training and teach them to pull in harmony, they can pull over 25,000 pounds. Yes, the team is so much more productive. How important is the mate? I well remember a couple of years ago I was up in Richmond, Virginia. I checked in fairly late at night in the hotel, and I walked over to the elevator, and I mashed the button waiting for the elevator. And a fellow traveler, a lady, came up, and she had 4 or 5 bags, and I exchanged pleasantries, and she was pretty cool and quiet, and she had very little to say. She just acknowledged that I was alive. And then the elevator came up from the basement, and an enthusiastic young bellman stepped off, and he immediately grabbed the lady's bags and put them on the elevator. And then he reached out to get my bag, and he recognized me, and he literally shouted, "Ziglar!" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Man alive, am I ever glad to see you." And he grabbed my hand, then he hugged me, and he said, "Man, I just can't tell you how much you've meant in my life. You really are something." And the lady very coolly said, "And what is it that you do?" And the bellman instantly responded and said, "Oh, he writes books and makes speeches. As a matter of fact, he's the greatest in the whole world. That's who he is." And The lady very coolly said, and to what do you owe your remarkable success? There was a delay of about 1/10 of a second, and the bellman shouted out, the redhead, that's who he owes it to.
He's always telling others, and I hear this all over the country when I travel with him, that he says such wonderful things about me. And I just want everybody to know that he means the same to me, and I love him very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What can we do as individuals? How can we preserve our marriages? Not only preserve them, but how can we make absolutely certain that courtship after marriage literally becomes romance for a lifetime? I believe it really starts with a commitment. One of the things I got such a kick out of because it was so tragically funny was this young couple. It was in a cartoon. They were in a jewelry store selecting an engagement ring. The young fella's saying, let's just get a little diamond, honey. After all, it's just the first marriage for both of us. Now, that's what I'm talking about. There's so many people that don't have the word commitment in their vocabulary. We did a massive survey. It was unscientific, but we had a lot of help in putting the survey together involving numbers and numbers of couples who had been married 25 years or longer and said they would marry the same person again. And one of the questions we asked them was simply, when you got married, did you consider it a lifetime commitment? We were stunned. We expected the answer to be high. We were stunned when 100% of them said, yes. When we got married, it was a lifetime commitment. One of the most amazing stories, and one of the advantages in keeping it as a lifetime commitment is this. I returned from Australia 5 years ago, and during my absence, a good friend of mine had died. He was 39 years old. He was a very healthy young man, an athlete. Series of circumstances involving a clot in his life was snuffed out. He and his wife had had more difficulties, I believe, than any couple that I have ever observed. They were good people. I don't know if the difficulty was his or hers or theirs. I suspect it was the latter. They were honest and sincere. They would separate, and then they couldn't stand to be apart. They would get back together, and they couldn't get along, and that routine went on for several years. But they were absolutely determined to make their marriage work. About a year after his death, we had the privilege of having his widow and her son in our home. She told us that the last 8 months of their marriage, they'd put it all together. With tears in her eyes but a smile on her face, she said, Zig, I believe that those 8 months were literally heaven on earth. I tell you, I never dreamed that human beings could enjoy each other so much, be so close to each other, and love each other so much. She said, the heritage that we will leave our children, as far as the family is concerned, I believe they will always remember those last 8 months. She said, I'm so glad we kept after it, that we determined to make it work.
When I think of commitment, I think of our wedding day, and the words that just came into my mind, I don't think I'd really thought about them up to that point, but the words that just came into my mind were how Christ gave himself for the church. And to me, commitment was my duty as my wife's husband to try to love her with the kind of love that Jesus has for the church. And he gave himself for the church. I, in the same way, should give myself for my wife.
I remember when I first met Jim, I called my mom, I guess the next day, and I said, I got to tell you about this guy. And there was something about him. I said, I wasn't really attracted to him physically at first, but there was something in there, inside him. And I prayed one night, I said, Lord, if I ever get married,
I want to marry somebody just like him. And I think it ties in with commitment. It wasn't a gushy feeling or anything. It's basically what we hear a lot about. It's not your feelings, and it's not just being happy or talking or sharing jokes and good times, but it's a decision that we made.
Now, I know a young man who walked off and left his wife. And I said to myself, he doesn't realize it, but he's making a junkyard out of his old age. His old age won't be a good old age. He can't have family reunions. He can't have grandchildren that have grown up with him. He can't have an older spouse who understands him. And really, he mortgaged his future just for present.
But there's a certain security in not just taking your marriage for granted, but I know he's not going to leave me, and I'm not going to leave him, and that reinforces your commitment to me. But I think women look for security.
If you're going to stay married, it takes commitment. I'll never forget, I was in Grand Saline, Texas. I was checking out the donut shop, which is one of my favorite hobbies. And sitting next to me at the table was a country couple with he about 40 years old. He had overalls on. She had a cheap cotton dress on. And when they finished a little bit before I did, and I expected them to get up and pay and leave, and he got up and paid, and she kept sitting, and I wondered why. Then he came back and he faced her, and she put her arms around his neck, and he lifted her out of the chair, and she had a full body brace on. He backed her out to the door and backed her into his pickup truck. And we were just watching this, and the little waitress, nobody was saying anything, the little waitress said, "He took his vows seriously, didn't he?" And I said to myself, that's commitment. And I think in order to stay married, there has to be commitment by both sides.
Let me share this with you. At age 45, I was stone broke and in debt. I'd worked all of my life, literally. I started when I was a child. I was working in a grocery store before I was 10. I was a teller in a grocery store. Not trying to impress you with a title. That just meant I told people to move while I swept. I mean, I was not the manager. I had a newspaper route. By 16, by 15, actually, I was running a meat market. I've always been enthused. I've always been a hard worker, and yet at age 45, I was broke and in debt. We'd been married 27 years before I was ever able to give that redhead any financial security. Now, that does not mean we were broke all the time. We had some good times. But there were a lot of times we were on that roller coaster. I was what I identify as a wandering generality. There was one 5-year period that I was in 17 different things. I really was a wandering generality. I got in every get-rich-quick deal that came down the pike. I finally got so broke I had to go to work. That's what happened. In those first 27 years, though, she never had financial security. Not once did that redhead ever say to me, "Honey, if we just had more money, here's what we could do." It was always, tomorrow is going to be better. You can do it. Ladies, there's no way on earth I will ever be able to say to you strongly enough, I could never measure what it meant to us as a family, to me as an individual, to have that cheerleader cheering me on every day of my life and praying for me every night. Gentlemen, there is no way I can say to you what it would mean to your wife for you to become her cheerleader, for you to become her booster, for you to become her encourager, for you to become the good finder in her life and the support in her life. I can tell you it'll do wonders for her. It'll do wonders for you. It'll do magnificent things for the marriage itself.
This would be a good time to stop and reflect on the information Zig and our couples have been sharing. Now let's rejoin Zig Ziglar for more on courtship after marriage.
some while back, these two old boys down home, and most people know me well enough to know that there are an awful lot of old boys down home, but these two old boys were out deer hunting, and they hit the jackpot. I mean, they got a big one, 16 points. And one of them grabbed him by one hind leg, and the other one grabbed him by the other hind leg, and they were pulling him through the underbrush, and they were working up a good, healthy little sweat when they met another hunter who obviously knew a lot about hunting. It's just that he didn't have anything to show for it. So he said to them, fellas, you know, I know it's your business. I want to congratulate you on this marvelous buck you have here. But if you will pull him by the rack, if you will pull him by the horns, he won't get those horns caught on the underbrush. It'll be lots easier. So the two old boys, you know, they wanted to show their appreciation for his kind words. And so they grabbed him by the horns and they started pulling. And then gone a couple hundred yards, and one of them said, boy, said, this is lots easier. The other one said, yeah, it sure is. First one said, that was one more smart fellow, wasn't it? Second one said, I don't think he was so smart. You see, we're getting further from the car all the time. You see, the reality is there are a lot of occasions when husband and wife get further and further apart all the time. Because, you see, everybody always has a tendency to blame somebody else. You remember the story of Adam and Eve. There they were in the Garden of Eden where they had absolutely everything. And God gave them some specific instructions. He said, now you can eat anything you want, but in the center of the garden there is a tree of which you must not eat that fruit. Well, you know what happened. They ate the fruit. You remember that evening God came walking in the garden and he said, Adam, now this is not going to be verbatim. Now God knew where Adam was, obviously, but he said, where are you? And Adam said, over here, Lord. God asked Adam a question. He said, Adam, did you eat that fruit? Now, all he wants is a simple answer. He doesn't want a theological discussion. Yes or no is all the answer he wants. But you know what Adam said? He said, Lord, let me tell you about that woman. Then God asked Eve, said, Eve, did you eat that fruit? And you know what Eve said? She said, Lord, let me tell you about that serpent. And, of course, the serpent didn't have a leg to stand on. Now, I know, there's some of my theological friends that will argue with that, and I'll accept the argument, but I also want to say this to you, that you don't have a leg to stand on when you start blaming other things and other people for the difficulties. Each one of us, husband and wife, must accept that responsibility.
Take full responsibility for everything that's going to happen in your family. I'm responsible. Karen can tell you that if our house burned to the ground, and it did in 1986, if there's a mistake or something happens, I take full responsibility. Because although it's a joint partnership, ultimately I should be responsible. That means that I've got to the burden for communication or understanding or anything should be mine. And I think she feels that way too. She's fully responsible too. So if you have two people coming out of marriage saying that I take full responsibility, that means that you're probably going to be able to work your way out of any situation that you might find your way in. And that ultimately, that's where the stability comes from. Is not that you're going to be free from these calamities of life, but that you do know how to work your way out of those kind of things, back to some stability.
You have just accepted the total responsibility for everything, right?
Okay, I signed up.
No, I think it's important in a family also that you get a fairly clear picture of what each's function is. Marilyn is the mother. She's the wife. She's the glue that holds our family together. She's the one who arranges special occasions, and she talks to the kids on the phone, and they talk to her. She really holds the family together. I'm the provider.
I don't want him to think that he is just the provider. he is the strength in the home. I mean, he is the head of our home, and he does provide that strength that we need.
You know, a lot of husbands and wives would probably court each other more, you know, if they knew how. But I can say this, one of the things, matter of fact, the way you start is by being truly grateful that your mate is not perfect.
Now, I don't know if any of you have noticed this about your mate yet or not, but I've got news for you. If you have not noticed it, I'm here to tell you your mate is not perfect, and the reason you ought to be grateful for that is very simple. If your mate were perfect, neither he or she would have married you. In other words, you would not be married to each other. So just be grateful that your husband is not perfect. Be grateful that your wife is not perfect, because they obviously are not. Dr. George Crane says that if you've fallen out of love with your mate, if you will go back and court them again as you did originally, then you will fall back in love with them. Now, for those of you who have been born since 1960, or you believe strongly in the feminist movement, I encourage you to be open-minded and have the courage to hang in there, even if you and I disagree on a few things, because I have something special to say to you that you may not have heard before now. This starting over business, you remember how it was, ladies, when you met him? You remember when you went home and you said to your mom, "Oh, Mom, I just met him." Met who? "Oh, Mom, I met him. Cutest boy you've ever seen, Mom." Now, it doesn't look like much, but, Mom, I tell you, you just got to meet him. And you guys remember how it was when you met her and you got that date. Oh, were you ever excited? And the big night finally came. You left home an hour early, even though she lived only 3 miles down the road. I mean, you didn't want to take any chances in case you did have a flat, and as luck would have it, that's exactly what happened. Well, you didn't have a spare, so you had to go walking back to the service station and, get it patched up, and by the time you got it repaired, you were running late, so you called her on the phone and said, "Honey, I'm awful embarrassed. I'm running a little bit late, but I'm on my way." And you remember how it was, ladies, how you told him, "Well, that's perfectly all right, but I am glad you called, because I would have been worried about you, but I'll be ready when you get here." And, of course, you knew perfectly good and well you weren't going to be ready when he got there. I mean, you made that rascal wait the respectful 20 minutes that a fella ought to have to wait on that first date. But do you remember the entrance you made when you came out? I mean, you had your best foot forward, and, I mean, you were just a prancing in. You remember how it was, don't you, on that first one? And you guys, you know how you treated that little girl. Been running up and down those front steps every day for the last 18 years, but all of a sudden you become concerned about her ability to negotiate those steps. Why, some of them were 7 inches high. And so you help the poor little thing down the steps. And then you get out to the car, and no female girl could be expected to open a monstrous car door. And so you opened it for her, and you saw to it that she was comfortably seated, and then you securely closed that door, and you go driving down to the movie. You get in the movie, and you load up on the popcorn and the candy and the Coke, and you get in there, and you wolf yours down as fast as you can, and 2/3 of hers, and then you watch the movie for about 20 minutes, and then you've been thinking about this thing, for some little while, and you have been sitting there, so you decide to stretch. You remember, don't you, you rascal, how you drop your hand and it just happened to fall on her shoulder. Ah, you clever rascal, you. And then one day you got married. You remember when the movie was over, how you walked out chatting about anything and everything. You went by to have a piece of pie and a cup of coffee or a Coke or something, and you were just enthralled with each other. Talk, and you went home and told your parents and your friends and everybody else what a brilliant conversationalist the other one was, how bright they are. Not only is she beautiful, but she's bright, and she really has personality. And girls, you remember all the good things you said about him, and then one day you got married.
we learned early on in our marriage that we were going to let each other down. We were going to fail each other. Our humanity just dictates that. But that regardless of that, Christ was not going to fail us. And so therefore, we could relax and enjoy the struggle. And at times it is, and times it's enormously rewarding. But there are hard times too, and we had the freedom to fail because there was fresh grace and new starts. We had experienced that in a sort of in a big way, with a restart in our marriage. Fortunately we had the community of faith and a lot of individuals around us that helped us get that restart. But if that's true about a big restart, it's also true about little restarts. So that no matter how insignificant the problem might be, we know that there was a new start out there somewhere.
Want to build a beautiful romance? You want to keep that courtship alive? You need to start and end every day properly. Get up a little early. Get in a few of those hugs over a quiet cup of coffee together. You wake the kids together if there are any. You both participate in that process of getting them ready to do what they need to do. And then, fellas, when you get ready to part company, you need to kiss your wife goodbye. Now, I don't mean kiss her goodbye like your little sister. And I don't mean kiss her goodbye like you're 117 years old. I mean kiss your wife goodbye. An insurance company in Germany did a rather substantial study on this, and they discovered that the men who kissed their wives goodbye, as we'd say down home, they flat stropped one on her, they left her well kissed. These men lived an average of 5.5 years longer than did the men who did not do this. Fellas, your life is at stake. This is serious. And for you ladies, I want you to know that these men who left home with that kind of kiss earned 20 to 30% more money than did the men who had to leave home under their own power. You start the day that way. Then at the end of the day, if the wife beats the husband home, I encourage you that what you want to do is go back and put on a little of that good, sweet-smelling stuff, maybe freshen up a little bit. See, your husband had been looking at good-looking women all day, and you want to make certain he sees the best-looking woman he's seen all day when he gets home, and by far the friendliest one. Husbands, if you beat the wife home, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. And what you need to do is get freshened up a little bit, brush your teeth, maybe put on a little cologne of some kind. And most importantly, if you want to score all kind of points, if you will take the wash out of the washing machine and get the drying process started, which she had done in the morning, the washing part of it, if you will put the cat out and feed the dog and get the dinner started for the evening, man alive, I'll tell you, you'll score all kind of points. And then when you do get together, greet each other positively and affectionately. Now, the reason I say that is so many times, husbands and wives, when they get back together at the end of the day, they start going through a laundry list of problems they've had all day. You can't believe what that knucklehead down at the company did today. And the other one said, well, let me tell you about that bonehead that I worked with, about what he did. And not only that, this fella came in there, and you start dumping all of that garbage on each other, and over a period of time, what happens is you start no longer looking forward to seeing the other. Give them a big hug, a big kiss. Start the day that way. Ask your mate, what was the most exciting thing you did today? What was the most fun thing you did today? Then together y'all function as a team. And then if you have difficulties about the job or something, you need to discuss. You do it quietly after the dinner meal is over. Really, it's made up of a lot of little things. Let me tell you, one of the things that I enjoy so much, a lot of times I'll come in my home at 8:30, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the evening.
And I smell the popcorn. Now, I can pop my own popcorn. I can get my own coffee. But when she does it, it just seems to taste better. And what she's doing is saying, honey, I want to do this for you. I think, husbands and wives, when they do the little things like that, that's what love's about. That brings them closer together. When I talk about little things like the husband opening the car door and even encouraging the wife, if the husband gets up and leaves and doesn't give indication he's going to open that door, I tell the wife she ought to sit on that horn. I mean, remind the rascal of what he ought to do. Now, I know she's capable of opening the door to the car and to the house and all, but what that really does, it just serves as a reminder. You're important to me. Let me do this little thing for you. I love you.
Be a gift giver. This is for husbands and wives, too. A lot of times it does not have to be an elaborate gift. A card, a love letter, or something of that nature is important. For birthdays and anniversaries, it absolutely is critical that you remember them, and if the bankroll or the budget will not stand a gift, then the simple handwritten letter can make such a big difference. And ladies, when your husband does bring a gift home, please don't be like one lady I heard one time. Bless his heart, her husband just blew it. He brought the wrong size, the wrong color, the wrong style, the wrong everything home. And she proceeded to publicly berate him in every conceivable way. I don't look good in green. Besides, that was the wrong size. And we needed something else, not this. I mean, he so completely discouraged that husband, I bet he never again tried to buy her anything. Now, understand, I recognize that what I'm now going to say is sound like I'm bragging. And maybe I am. But in the 43 years we've been married, I have never made a mistake in a gift I have brought my wife. If it's an article of clothing, it's always the right size. It's always the right color. It's always exactly what she needed, always exactly what she wanted. Honey, I can't believe that you were able to get exactly what I needed. Now confess that many times I never see the item again. What she does is she goes down and she swaps it for something that she really did need, that was the right size, that was the right color. But she made me feel so good that I'm just determined to try it again and even do better the next time. One little word of advice, fellas. If you're buying your wife an article of clothing and you don't really remember the size, just buy her a petite and save the sales slip. I can guarantee you, you're not going to get her upset with that particular approach.
I think one of the things that Mary Alice does that pleases me a great deal, and that is her sense of gratitude. She has a tremendous sense of gratitude. And this is not so with a lot of people. I had a friend who married late in life, and his wife took a vacation. And when she was coming back, he thought how romantic it would be, so he went out in the yard and picked a rose and put it in a glass of water and hand-made a little sign, welcome home, honey. And she walked in and she took the rose, crumpled it up in her fist, threw it out in the yard, and called him a very unpleasant name, saying he was cheap, that every other husband she'd ever heard of bought his wife a dozen red roses. Well, this, to me, is totally unthinkable. I could give Mary Alice anything. I could bring her, soap from the hotel, or I could bring her, sugar off of the airlines, or anything, and my wife is going to appreciate it.
Peanuts, preferably.
Yeah, but she always is grateful for whatever I do, and I appreciate that.
He's very courteous, and the little things like, well, to me it's a big thing. Opening the car door, he had to train me to stay in the car till he would open it for me. That and calling if he's going to be late. He insists that scrubbing toilets and tubs is a man's work. And I'm not going to argue with that one. I appreciate that.
I can't imagine a lady as pretty as this scrubbing something so nasty.
Thank you.
he met me at a time when I was in school. I was not the person that I could have been, not the potential. And he saw through the riffraff. He saw the beauty, the love in me, and he pulled that from me. He helped me develop my personality, develop my love. He has always been one to compliment. You know, I don't leave the house without being told something nice.
She does little things. I mean, it might sound corny, but it's not. You know, if she'll come by the office on her way to work sometimes, you know, if she has to get something out of my car, there's a little note, you know, saying, I love you, have a great day. She's my biggest cheerleader.
We try to spend, like on Friday nights, our date night. That's the night that we set aside to go out together and to do something. We try to get a babysitter, but if not, we'll just take our son and we'll go out and do something together. But it's those little bitty things that make a big difference. I've never yet bought roses, and even though they die in a week, they were a bad investment. They've always been a great investment because of the mileage you get out of that. You can take $5, go to a department store, buy 5 little Hallmark cards, send them to your wife, one a day or one every other day. And by the 5th day, she'll be running to that mailbox at the office looking for that card. And I call it the Hallmark program.
You remember in the book of Genesis how Adam had been by himself all of his life. God could see it wasn't good for man to be alone. And so he put him to sleep and performed surgery. And when Adam awakened, there was the most beautiful woman in history. I know. Some of you are thinking, well, Zig, she was the only woman in history. That's right. But she still is the most beautiful woman in history because she had just come out of the hand of God. And when he creates something, he always creates perfection. You remember that verse in the book of Genesis when Adam saw Eve? He said, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Now, let me ask you something, folks. Remember, Adam been by himself all of his life. Here's the most gorgeous hunk of femininity ever. Do you really think Adam said, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh? You have absolutely got to be kidding. In the original language, according to Dr. Hendricks, it came out in a far more expressive way. Interpreted properly, it simply is, wow! Sex is beautiful. It's delightful. It's necessary. God made it so. It's an expression of oneness, a total commitment, a complete self-giving, a sacred obligation. Sex is not a right to claim selfishly, not a favor to withhold selfishly, not a weapon to dominate another, not a reward for good behavior. Red Book Magazine did an extensive study. Over 100,000 women were involved. One of the largest studies ever done. When the results were in, it was absolutely clear that those women who had the deep spiritual convictions and beliefs, the greater their religious convictions, the greater their sexual satisfaction in the marriage. We need to keep that in mind because it is such a priceless gift. Now, what I'm really getting at is something very, very simple. The sexual relationship between husband and wife is the most beautiful relationship God created for man and woman. But so many times us men are not as sensitive as we need to be. Fellas, your wife resents it when you ignore her all day and then give her your undivided attention when the lights go out. And I'm going to tell you frankly that if you gripe about the mashed potatoes at 6:30, all you're going to get the rest of the evening is cold shoulder. The sexual relationship is not a separate part of the relationship. It really is part of the relationship itself. And I want to say some things about it because it is so critically important. Ladies, to ignore your husband's efforts, though they might be clumsy, to set the stage for intimacy will set up resentment within the marriage. Sexual rejection for a man is complete rejection. And fellas, the wife who is expected to meet her husband's needs and desires with no consideration of her own will feel used. That's not the way to build wedded bliss. All of us want to be romanced, and for the sexual relationship to reach the ultimate, it takes time, it takes affection, it takes thoughtfulness. You need to hug when a hug is all you're interested in. And I guess I just flat hit the jackpot there. As many people know, the redhead is affectionately known as the happy hugger. In a day's time, when I'm around the house doing my writing and dictating and telephoning, we will hug 15 to 40 times. They're not lengthy hugs. They're not suggestive hugs. They simply say, I'm so glad you're mine. I'm so glad we're together. I'm so glad you love me and I love you. It's so wonderful to be together. What I'm saying again is that we need to demonstrate that affection throughout our marriage, throughout our day. Sex within the marriage is pleasurable and it contributes to happiness. Outside the marriage, it's absolutely a disaster. I've had a lot of privileges in my lifetime, privileges that very few men or women ever experience. I've shared the platform with 2 presidents of the United States, many senators and congressmen, Secretary of Defense, and others. I have personal friends worth over $1 billion. I've worked with the superstars in entertainment and athletics. But for 14 years, I knocked on doors in direct sales. I've been in homes in America where I could literally look through the floor and see the ground underneath, then raise my eyes and see the stars above. I've crossed every socio-economic, racial, ethnic line this country has to offer. And I have never known a happy man or a happy woman who was married, who was not totally, completely, 100% loyal to their mate. Period. Not preaching, I really am not. I'm not even moralizing. I'm simply saying that if you are married and you want a happy life, a happy marriage, then you have no other options. It is complete faithfulness to your mate.
Sex in marriage is such a God-given gift because God invented sex. He invented us. He created us. And
with that desire.
Yes. And to experience that kind of physical union, you know, when God has blessed it, when God has anointed that time for 2 people to be together, it's just beyond what anything the world can offer.
Because it's wonderful in marriage. It really is. Because there's that commitment there that makes it an added blessing. It's not the end. You know, that's not what you're doing it for. It's just an added blessing to marriage.
I agree.
So many times, couples tend to focus on the romance aspect in the bed, but you have to make love to a person's mind, and lovemaking goes on throughout each and every day of the relationship. It's the hugging, the patting, the kissing, the compliments. A lady needs to feel that she's loved even before you go to bed with her.
If you just go to bed and want to make love to your mate, you know, it's no feelings there. You have to have that to go on all day long, you know, where you're romancing each other and maybe kissing or hugging or patting or whatever. But I think that's really strong.
There's nothing like being married and being in love and actually making love, because there's a huge difference between making love and sex. What we have together is just beautiful. and it's just an awesome extension.
It's a mixing. It's a mixing of not only physically, it's a mixing mentally of your souls just going in and out. That's where you really become one. That's where it's beautiful.
On September the 15th, 1944, at 6 minutes after 9 o'clock, in the YWCA in Jackson, Mississippi, where I was stationed at Millsaps College in the United States Navy, I walked into the YWCA, and in the little room where they're having the party, I cast my eyes upon a beautiful young girl with long auburn hair down to her shoulders. When I looked at her, I said, my search is over. There was the redhead standing right there. I went over and with considerable originality, I said to her, hi. And with equal originality, she said to me, hi. And that started it all right there. We were at a dance being given for us as sailor boys in the Navy, and we started dancing and arguing all at the same time. But the twinkle in her eye told me that she wasn't taking the argument very seriously. Fortunately, she was spending the night with her girlfriend, Dot Capps, who lived right across the street from the Millsaps College campus. And so I rode the bus home with them that night. I got her telephone number, and the romance started.
He was a really handsome young man, so that was number one. He was also very outgoing. He was personable, and the way he treated me always as a lady, and through the years he's kept that up.
In less than a month, I just knew I was in love with that girl. 6 months later, there was no doubt about it. A year later, absolutely beyond any doubt. 5 years later, I knew it. 10 years later, I knew it. 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later. But let me tell you something. The truth is, I love her more today than I ever have. The love grows all the time.
I can honestly say, without any hesitation, that we're far more in love today than we've ever been, have more fun together than ever before, enjoy doing more things together than ever.
One of the most moving events of my life took place a number of years ago in the bedroom of our home. It was fairly early in the morning, and the redhead and I had gotten up, and we were just seated there drinking our coffee. Really, neither one of us had much to say. Then she looked at me and very quietly said, you know, honey, I wish I were younger. I said, for goodness sake, sweetheart, why? She said, if I were younger, I could be married to you even longer. Folks, I got to tell you, that was one of the most beautiful and poignant moments in my life. It convinced me beyond any doubt that love is not found in those faraway places with those strange-sounding names. Love is found right in the confines of your own home with your mate.
Let's stop again and reflect on some important courtship after marriage principles. Now let's rejoin Zig Ziglar as he brings Courtship After Marriage to a thought-provoking close.
I close by simply saying to you that in my mind, love is a baked sweet potato. Now, I know that some of you, as you watch this, might be a little stunned by that statement. But I'm talking about a baked sweet potato about the size of a man's fist. If it's bigger than that, it's grainy. If it's smaller than that, it gets to be stringy. You want it baked in a moderately hot oven, because if the oven is too hot, it causes the skin to dry out and swell up, and it's not good to eat. And really, the skin is the best part of the potato. When you take that potato out of that oven, you slit it right down the middle, and you just put gobs of that good old polyunsaturated margarine in there. Oh, I hate to make that bow to the cholesterol in that good old country butter, but I got to do it. And you put that margarine all through it, saturate every nook and cranny, and all you put is the margarine. If you put anything else in that potato, you absolutely will ruin it. Now, you eat the baked sweet potato either as a separate meal or as a dessert. And before you take that first bite of the potato, you take a good cold drink of water so those taste buds are alive and snapping and popping. I mean, it's going to be a unique experience. You literally close your eyes as you take a small bite of that potato, and I'm here to tell you that's one of the most magnificent experiences we can experience on the face of this earth. It is beyond my wildest imagination to be able to understand how anybody could not go into absolute ecstasy at the pure thought of a baked sweet potato. You might sit there and think to yourself, Zig, a baked sweet potato. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, I can't believe anybody wouldn't get excited about it. But of all the people on the face of this earth who does not really love the baked sweet potato, the redhead doesn't really love them. Now, she'll tolerate them. She will eat them on occasion, but she doesn't get excited about eating them. So when I walk in the front door of my home, and as I open the door, when that tantalizing odor of that baked sweet potato hits me right squat flat in the nose, I know that that redhead has been to the grocery store. I know she was thinking about me when she was there. I know she was thinking about me when she picked up the potato. She was thinking about me when she came home and washed it and put it in the oven. She was thinking about me. And I know when she watched the odor from that potato drift down out of the oven, cross the kitchen floor, turn left going down the hallway, and then take the shortcut across the living room rug. I know when all of that was going on, she was thinking about me. Yes, love really is a baked sweet potato. You might be sitting there thinking, but Zig, a baked sweet potato? That is such a little thing. Yeah, it really is. Such a little thing. But isn't that is what's necessary to build a magnificent marriage? Doing a lot of little things every day for your mate for no reason at all except the best reason of all. And that is you love your mate and you want the marriage to get more beautiful all the time. Yes, love is a baked sweet potato.
Thank you for taking part in Courtship After Marriage, which is just one of several exciting and informative Zig Ziglar family growth programs. Other titles you would enjoy are Clean, Straight, and Sober, Preserving the Family, and Raising Positive Kids in a Negative World. The Zig Ziglar Corporation offers a wide assortment of personal growth, family growth, and corporate training products. Your free color catalog is available at fine bookstores everywhere, or by writing to the Zig Ziglar Corporation, 3330 Earhart, Carrollton, Texas, 75006.